In 1789 AD, the French monarch of the old regime, King Louis XVI, was under great pressure to increase the taxes. But why do you think the king felt the need to increase taxes in his kingdom? Apart from maintaining the administration and the army, the government also had to maintain its extravagant court at Versailles. French aid to the American colonies in the American War of Independence also increased its debts. The state also had to pay interests on loans taken from previous lenders. All these factors forced the king to think about raising taxes. Taxes in the old regime in France could only be increased by calling a meeting of the Estates General. Representatives of the three estates of French society had to be present at the meeting. King Louis XVI decided to call the meeting of the Estates General in May 1789. This meeting was called about 175 years after the previous Estates General of 1614 AD. The Estates General was attended by 300 representatives, each from First and Second Estates. The Third Estate, which comprised the newly arisen middle class, sent 600 representatives. This estate carried 40,000 letters outlining the demands of women, artisans and peasants, who had not been allowed to come into the hall. In spite of its larger numbers, the Third Estate was given less importance, while the First and the Second Estates were seated face to face, closer to the king. What do you think was the main issue discussed by these estates? These estates met and discussed gravely the issue of number of votes allotted to decide important matters in the Estate General. Earlier, each estate was allowed one vote each, which brought the total to 3 votes. In this meeting, the Third Estate, inspired by Rousseau's social contract, demanded 1 vote each for every one of the members of the Estates General. This gave 300 votes each to both the First and Second Estates and 600 votes for the Third Estate, bringing the total to 1200 votes. However, King Louis XVI rejected the demands of the Third Estate, forcing them to walk out of the Estates General. These disgruntled members of the Third Estate began to look for new ways to deal with the unjust system. How do you think the Third Estate reacted after their demands were rejected? Much later, the Third Estate gathered at a tennis court in Versailles, where it declared itself as the National Assembly and took the famous tennis court oath. The tennis court oath, which promised to make a new constitution for France based on demands of the Third Estate, was led by the noble Mirabeau and the priest Abbé Sieyès. Do you think that only the middle classes in the Third Estate in Versailles were affected by the issues plaguing the French nation at this time? No. In fact, even the rest of France was in turmoil at this time. Bread prices had gone up, and women had started attacking hoarders and shop owners. The revolt became even more violent when on 14th July 1789, many rebels stormed the castle of Bastille and released the political prisoners who had been confined there. Not far away in the French countryside, peasants and villagers heard rumors that the rich lords intended to destroy their crops and fields. These peasants panicked with fear and revolted against the aristocrats living near them. They took up arms and raided local manors. Records containing the dues of the peasants were burnt by the mob. The noble lords and their families were forced to flee the country. Pressurized by the alarming conditions, King Louis XVI was forced to recognize the National Assembly as a legitimate representative body. Thus, in this way, the 1789 revolution in France, led by the common people, had shown its effect. Now, let's summarize the concepts we have learned.